how's it going? Statman coming right back at you once again, and in this video, taking a break from all the pickups and whatnot that I've been doing, I'm going to be talking about Solo, a Star Wars story, and in particular I'm going to be talking about the boycott, as it were, that appears to be taking place against Solo, a Star Wars movie. At least there are a lot of people calling for a boycott and saying that they're going to boycott this movie. And I have some things to say about that. But before I get into the things that I have to say about that, let me first, before I do anything else, because I know how people get about Star Wars right now and about the things that they love and that they're a fan of and everything. You know, I get it. I'm a geek too. I understand. And I also understand what a certain segment of fans is going to say and how they might feel about this subject. So before I go any further, let me just acknowledge that yes, there is a group of fans, and I am not going to minimize them, okay? Just let you guys be nice and happy. I'm not minimizing you. I'm not saying you're a vocal minority. God forbid you be a minority, I know. But, you know, when people use that word, when they call it a vocal minority, or even say it's a minority or a small group of fans, they make it sound like it's like a handful, like a dozen people out there. And the reality is there are like probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of fans out there who are upset about the direction that Star Wars is taking. So there, I didn't minimize you. I fully acknowledged you. You got full acknowledgement in this video from a guy who doesn't agree with you. But there it is. Full acknowledgement. You're not small. You are pretty freaking big. And I feel like it's a very dangerous, very bad idea to minimize your particular group, because, like, it's not as if you don't have power. You have plenty of power. And that's not to say that I'm afraid that you're going to have some negative effect on the results of Star Wars, on the results in particular of Solo, a Star Wars story. You may, if you boycott this film, you may have some kind of a negative effect on it, but I highly doubt you will. I am 99% positive this movie is still going to make over $1 billion worldwide, because every single Star Wars film that has come out since Disney bought the franchise has made over $1 billion worldwide. So, that all said and that out of the way, I wanted to address some of the concerns that people happen to have in regards to the direction that Star Wars is taking and their decision to boycott Solo, a Star Wars story. And yes, as the title indicates, I want to talk about why I think that's stupid. So the whole reason that I found out about this in the first place was because I started to notice some videos popping up in my feed. I'm a Star Wars fan, so needless to say, YouTube is going to sell me on some videos related to Star Wars. And some of those videos were talking about how these people wanted to boycott Solo, a Star Wars movie. And I was like, but why? I mean, the first thing I thought was, do they really hate the guy who plays Han Solo that much? Because I can kind of understand that argument. I don't think he's going to be bad at actually portraying the character. I think he's going to do a fairly decent job of that. But I can see what people are saying when they say, wait a minute, this guy does not look like Han Solo, because he really does not look like Han Solo. I can totally and fully agree with you on that particular point. But I am the kind of film viewer, I've seen so many movies in my life. I've attended classes on film. I minored in film studies, guys. I minored in that crap. So I really love film. I really dig into film a lot, and I have watched the crappiest of the crap, and I have watched the best of the best. You know, the most classic, excellent films ever made, and the most trashiest, pathetic, offensively bad films ever made. So I have a bit of context when I give my opinion of like whether or not something's terrible or good. To me, something that's a 6 out of 10 film is not the worst terrible tripe ever. It's actually a pretty serviceable film that I wouldn't mind watching again. And when I see Solo, a Star Wars movie, I see something that clearly, from the trailer, I can see already has some flaws. The one flaw I would point out in this case being that the guy who plays Han Solo doesn't quite look like Han Solo. But I'm willing to look beyond that, because one little flaw, well, I guess it's not, for some people it's not a little flaw, okay? I won't minimize that either. But one flaw in a movie, and you could say it's like a huge flaw that ruins everything, but I just don't agree that that is a flaw that would ruin everything about this movie. I think it's one small, in my opinion, a small flaw that does not affect the overall film, and I am hopeful that it will not affect the overall film. I'm hopeful that the film as a whole will actually be very good. And that's why I'm actually very excited to see Solo, a Star Wars movie, and I don't care if it sells very well, because I'm the kind of fan who could give or take whether or not they continue to do these story films based on characters and things that were left out of the plot of other Star Wars films, you know what I mean? I'm not necessarily sold on the concept of the Star Wars story films, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily think that the Star Wars universe needs them, and I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily want them, but I do have something to say about them later on in the video that I feel like will present a valid argument for why maybe they should exist. Maybe we should wait and see what actually comes of them. I know for a fact that most of the people, even a lot of people who want to boycott Solo, even a lot of people in this group of people that I'm talking about, right? The ones that aren't a minority, they're not a minority. Even they will admit that they actually kind of liked Rogue One. Some of them will even say they really loved it. And I can understand why. There was a lot of like classic cinematic references in that film. There was one scene that was a reference to an Akira Kurosawa film, and I just fucking loved it. And like, there's a reason why that movie is actually pretty damn good, alright? Because the people who made it actually really cared about Star Wars and about getting the story right. But it's interesting for me to note that the concept behind the story, behind the plot of the film, fits in perfectly with this whole new universe of Star Wars that we're seeing from the newer movies, at least. But yeah, I mean, I see people saying that they really loved Rogue One, which was another one of these Star Wars stories, but they're going to boycott Solo. Like, you liked the last Star Wars story. Some of you liked it a lot better than The Force Awakens, but you're not going to see the next one because why? Well, let's get into that. That's the thing I want to tackle first. The videos that I watched of people talking about why they wanted to boycott Solo, a Star Wars movie. So I picked out one video. I know I should probably do more than one, but then this video would be so freaking long, and nobody is... I mean, most people probably aren't even watching anymore. I'm going to be quite freaking honest. But for those of you who are, like, if I kept going after this one video that I'm about to, break down for you, nobody would be watching. Maybe in a future video, I'll talk about some of the other videos that I watched about people who wanted to boycott this film. But for now, I'm just going to pick one, because this one in particular, I feel like is very emblematic of the issues that people tend to have, the issues that people are taking with Solo, a Star Wars story, and in general with the direction that Star Wars is taking. So the video I'm going to be talking about is from a channel called Geeks and Gamers. It is called Kathleen Kennedy Says She Doesn't Care About Male Star Wars Fans. So the first thing I need to mention here, for those who may not know, Kathleen Kennedy is the president of Lucasfilm currently. So she's the one basically in charge of everything, and a lot of people don't like that. And in this video, we're going to discover some of the reasons why they don't like that. Or will we? I don't know. Well, we'll talk about it as we go along here. I'm not going to show any clips from the video because if I do, the person who made the video will probably immediately have my video flagged and taken down or whatever. I'm just not going to get into that. Instead, I'm going to offer you actual quotes that are from the video that you can go and watch yourself if you want to. And I'm going to be talking about some of the things that he said. And one of the first things that he said, the guy who did this video, was that Kathleen Kennedy is trying to insert some kind of SJW message. Now, those aren't the exact words, but it's the basic premise that he's trying to get across here. That Kathleen Kennedy is trying to insert some kind of SJW message that he doesn't agree with. And as evidence for this, he presents an article, he references an article from the New York Times. What I find interesting about this is that I don't believe he actually went to like the actual New York Times article in question. I think he went to another source that was quoting the New York Times article. But anyways, he provided a quote from this particular interview that New York Times did with Kathleen Kennedy, where she said, quote, "I have a responsibility to the company that I work with. I don't feel that I have a responsibility to cater in some way to those particular fans. I would never just seize on saying, well, this is a franchise that's appealed primarily to men for many, many years, and therefore I owe men something." So the first thing I want to do is point out that he chose a specific portion of the quote, of the full interview to talk about here. And he's attacking this specific portion, not actually giving it the full context. So for the purposes of full context, I want to add to what he quoted here, because there's more. There's a lot more that he didn't mention. And one of the things he didn't mention, which Kathleen Kennedy said, was, "A New Hope is the story of a boy who grows up in a tranquil home and dreams of joining a war. What if we have the story of a girl who grows up in a war and dreams of returning to the tranquility of home?" And she went on to talk about Jyn Erso from Rogue One, saying, like all of us, she's trying to work out what the hell to do. We wanted the audience to relate to Jyn as a person, whether you're a boy or a girl, man or woman. So with that full context, we can pretty easily make out that what she's talking about is not actually an attack on men. What she's talking about is trying to broaden the audience of Star Wars. She's trying to make the film appealing to as many audiences as possible, opening up the franchise to more women, since women are half the freaking population. And really, it's a business move, you guys. Disney owns Star Wars, and they want Kathleen Kennedy in charge of Lucasfilm because Kathleen Kennedy is trying to open up Star Wars to as big of an audience as possible, which they like because larger audiences typically mean more money. Or at least that's the thought. That's the idea behind the business model, right? But there are arguments to be made about that. Valid arguments to be made about that. But regardless, what I will say about the quote that he used in particular is that it is very popular. It is a quote that has been used by a lot of the people who are saying they want to boycott Solo. A lot of the people who are saying they're upset about the direction that Star Wars is taking. And they always reference it as proof that Kathleen Kennedy, as the video says she doesn't care about male Star Wars fans. But That's not what she's saying. She's saying she doesn't care about only male Star Wars fans. Do you get the difference there? Where she cares about appealing to more audiences than just male Star Wars fans? Do you understand how that's what she's saying? Not, men, I hate men, blah, 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 man-hating feminist. Like, she's not doing that. Why would she do that? It's not in her best interest. It's not in the best interest of a business model to completely cut out and attack half of your possible fan base. It doesn't make any sense to do that. So this quote really isn't any proof of any SJW bias. It really isn't. But I find it funny that the people in this group will look for things in the entertainment that they watch. This group is not necessarily just Star Wars fans, by the way. These are typically the same kind of people who don't like any movie that decides to put women in instead of men. You know what I mean? So, like, for example, Ghostbusters, the newer Ghostbusters movie, which I can agree wasn't necessarily great. But this particular group was really angry about that film from the get-go because it dared to replace, or what they saw as replacing, men with women. And again, that was a move that was probably made in an attempt to reach a wider audience. But the thing they immediately jumped on, the thing that immediately got on their radar was, oh, this is just more PC culture, SJW bullcrap. You're looking too hard for these things. You know how that phrase about, like, if you look too hard for something, you're going to inevitably find it everywhere you look? Like, that's what's happening here. You are looking for things and finding them specifically because you're looking for them, not because they're necessarily actually there. So you are assuming that that's what's going on here, that it's all some SJW conspiracy, when in reality it has nothing to do with that. It's all a business decision, and you have every right to disagree with that business decision and to point out some of the flaws with that business decision. But it's a business decision. It has nothing to do with identity politics. And can I just take a moment to point out the hypocrisy, the glaring, hilarious hypocrisy of a group of people who says they are anti-PC culture, anti-SJW, anti-snowflake, anti-trigger warning culture. They're anti all these things, right? And yet here they are getting triggered because they went looking specifically for proof of the SJW agenda somewhere in a fandom that they like. They're getting triggered like a snowflake, and they're the ones playing identity politics, and they're the ones who are demanding that everything be politically correct. Now, what I mean by that is they want everything to be correct in their political viewpoint. So what they want is more men, more films that are aimed at men, and less people trying to take movies away from men, or, particularly attack, as they see, attack men in the entertainment industry. They want people to stop feminizing films, and that is a political bias, and that is a demand for political correctness in favor of your political ideology. So you can't say it's not political correctness. It actually is political correctness from the viewpoint of your political ideology. So you're the ones being politically correct, demanding political correctness. You're the ones getting triggered by every little thing that looks like it might be an attack on you. You're the ones who are being snowflakes and bitching and whining and moaning about all this crap. It just, the irony will never cease to amaze me, because it's the most clear example and the most undeniable proof of projection. That's all you're doing. You're projecting your own insecurities on this fandom for all of them to see, as if we give a shit. Like, most of us don't care because we can see what you're doing and we know that it's not healthy, and we know that because, well, you don't necessarily want to hear people demanding political correctness, do you? No, that's why you take issue with it, right? You don't want people playing identity politics, but that's what you're doing, just for a different identity. You don't want people getting triggered over nothing, but you're getting triggered over nothing. Like, things that aren't actually there. As I said, that whole thing with Kathleen Kennedy supposedly saying that she doesn't care about male Star Wars fans is bullshit. That wasn't what she was trying to say at all. That's just the most stupid, ignorant argument anybody could make, because it's pretty clear that what she's talking about is trying to appeal to as many people as possible, not about shitting all over a bunch of people because of their gender or because they're male fans. So you misread that, and because you misread that, you got triggered. Your trigger in that case was anything that might resemble an SJW agenda. And so because it resembled to you an SJW agenda, you got triggered like a snowflake, and you demanded that your politically correct view be taken into consideration. Like, that's what's happening here. I just want to make that perfectly clear, because it seems like a lot of you don't understand what you're actually saying and what you're actually doing here. And I just want to present to you the possibility. I'll even take back, like, that's exactly what you're doing. That's my opinion of what you're doing. I'm presenting to you the possibility that maybe you're doing exactly what you tell everybody else they shouldn't be doing. And there's an irony to that and a hypocrisy to that. So take that for what you will, but let's continue on and get to talking more about this video. After reading the quote from Kathleen Kennedy, the guy from Geeks and Gamers asks, why would you be disrespectful toward any group? Revealing that he was offended by a statement that wasn't offensive because he was specifically looking for something to be offended by. Again, she wasn't being disrespectful toward any group. She was just saying that she wanted to make sure Star Wars appealed to as many audiences as possible and not just one type of audience. So the fact that he read into that and said, well, she's being disrespectful to a particular group. Like, no, she's not. She never attacked them. You read it as an attack because you are triggered by anything that remotely appears to be an attack against your particular viewpoint. So take that for what you will. Continuing on, he said that Lucasfilm has become so anti-white male right now. To that I just have to say, how can a movie franchise be anti-white male when it is literally, like, they did the math on this, it is literally 96% white male. 96% of the people who have been involved in the creation of Star Wars over the years have been white men. 96% of them. And that is not something changing quickly. Every single director who has directed a film based on Star Wars in the last few years since Disney bought the franchise has been a white male. When you say that Lucasfilm has become so anti-white male, I don't know what you're talking about, because that's literally the only people that they are willing to hire. And that's a problem if you really think about it hard enough. 96%. Get that figure in your head. 96% of the people who have worked on Star Wars films, even to this day, have been white men. So you need to understand that when you say that they're being anti-white men and they hire 96% white men for their movies, that makes no sense at all, and it flies in the face of the actual facts. So That is another argument that you made that doesn't make any sense and is just flat out fucking wrong. He continues on to say, the president of Lucasfilm straight up said, I know that this entire franchise has been centered around men, but I'm not going to cater to men. No, she didn't. She said, again, she's not going to cater to only men. She's going to cater to men and to women, to as many different audiences as possible, so that it can make as much money as possible. That's the idea. That's why she said it. End of story. He followed up his assertion about what Kennedy said by asking, how can anyone get away with this? How can anyone get away with what? Not catering a film specifically to men? Well, it's easy. They just don't cater a film to men. There are some films catered specifically to men, but most major motion pictures are catered to as many audiences as possible. Star Wars films are a major motion picture. He continued on to say that he hopes what he and others are saying will remain true and Star Wars will remain on the decline. What decline are you talking about? Every single Star Wars movie has made more than $1 billion since Disney bought the franchise. Every single one. So I don't know what you're talking about. They're making boatloads of cash. How is that a decline? From here he went on to say that he loves Star Wars, but, quote, I don't love it when it's driven by identity politics. Well, as I have said several times, I do not believe it is driven by identity politics. I believe you are the one who is trying to make this about identity politics. In particular, you are the one trying to say that it should be a film catered to men, because men are the ones who made it what it is. And you actually kind of prove that point with some of the things you say later on in the video. Like, it's not identity politics to say we should cater a film to as many people as possible, not just to one group of people. That's not identity politics. That has nothing to do with anybody's particular identity. She gave an example where she was talking about how she wanted to appeal to women and men. She just said she wanted that character, Jyn Erso, to appeal to men and women. That was the quote that you left out of context. You didn't talk about that particular quote because you wanted the quote that you could attack. You wanted the quote you could take out of context. You wanted your fucking straw man argument. So don't give me this crap about identity politics, because quite frankly, unless you have any actual evidence that there is identity politics going on in the movies themselves, then what are we talking about here? You're talking about the people who are actually, producing the films, the person in charge of Lucasfilm. You're talking about the people attached to the people who are working with Lucasfilm. And again, most of them are white men. So what are we even talking about when it comes to identity politics in Star Wars? I mean, at some point you have to admit that what you are finding in the films themselves is what you'd believe to be subtext, which is of a SJW nature, a social justice warrior nature. You think you're finding things in the film itself that you think are trying to promote a political ideology that you don't agree with, and you can't take it. You can't take a differing viewpoint, which is just crazy because you're the ones who complain about people who can't take a differing viewpoint and won't accept it. You're complaining about the very same thing that you do. You are a hypocrite. Or at least some people are. I can't really say that about this particular person in this video because they didn't necessarily do that. What I'm doing in this case is saying that I think that's at the heart of this. I think what's at the heart of this is people who didn't like the movie or didn't like the movies because they found something in it that they thought was promoting a political agenda they didn't agree with. And we can discuss that. We can have an argument about that, but we're not having an argument about that. We're having a discussion and an argument about identity politics on the outside of Star Wars, from people who are making Star Wars, which is just ridiculous for all the reasons I've already laid out. It doesn't exist. Making things up You're taking quotes out of context to try and make your point, and you're failing at making your point. I mean, a lot of people are being drawn in by what you're saying, so it's not necessarily that you're failing at, getting your point across. It's just that your point is bullshit. That's what I'm saying. All right, that's all I'm saying. From here, he says that it's just unbelievable that Kathleen Kennedy continues to say to the fans who made this franchise what it is, that I won't cater to you. So here he's asserting that men made this franchise what it is. Well, you're not wrong. 96% of the people who worked on creating the films were white men. You're not wrong about that. And a lot of the people who loved Star Wars films, a lot of the audiences who loved it were men. But there were a lot of women who enjoyed those movies too, which is why there's a pretty big fan base that is female for these films. What Kathleen Kennedy said in her quote was that she wanted to appeal to female fans and to male fans. She never said anything about not catering to the fans who made this franchise what it is. She said she's not going to cater to a specific group of people. That's all she said. She's trying to cater to as many groups of people as possible, to as many fans as possible, and to as many people who may not be fans but potentially can become fans as possible. That's the whole idea behind the business model. And at this juncture, I just have to say that this franchise wasn't made great by you and you alone. It wasn't made great by men alone. Men alone weren't the reason that Star Wars became what it was. There were a lot of female fans who contributed their own ideas and their own opinions about Star Wars over the years, which helped to shape what Star Wars eventually became. Wanting to cater to those female fans, there's nothing wrong with that. Wanting to cater to male fans as well, she's not trying to do that. You know what I mean? She's not specifically trying to avoid catering to male fans, and there's nothing in that quote that indicates that she is. You might have found something in the movie that you felt like was a jab at you, but if you can't prove that that's what was going on there, then it's literally like your opinion, man. You're coming up with things that may or may not actually be there and saying, that's definitely a jab at me, they're definitely attacking me, I feel triggered by it. Like, you're not admitting that you're triggered by it, but you're definitely triggered by it. That's, again, my opinion about what's going on here. But yeah, it's insane to me when I see any Star Wars fan insinuate, I feel like that's the right word here, their particular group of people were the ones who made Star Wars what it is, and that Kathleen Kennedy is saying they're not going to make a movie that caters to them. Correct me if I'm wrong in what you're trying to say there, but seriously, that's kind of what it sounds like, what you're saying. I mean, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt in this case, and I'll say maybe what you're saying is that you believe Kathleen Kennedy is saying she doesn't want to cater to men. Maybe that's all you're saying. But the way you said it kind of sounds like something else. But again, like, unlike you, who won't give the benefit of the doubt when you're watching a Star Wars film, and you immediately assume that, oh, this is SJW bullshit. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to just immediately assume. I will have that opinion. I will keep that opinion that to me is, in my opinion, what is going on, but I won't assume it. I won't say that's definitely what's happening, but I have proof, because I don't have proof. It's just my opinion, man. It's just your opinion that that's what she's saying. After this, he starts to talk about the people who are saying you're just making this up, it's all in your head. You know, people like me. And he says, what about the executive that works for Kathleen Kennedy and says, we need less men in the visual effects industry? Well, what about her? She's right. I mean, I just got done talking about how 96% of the people who worked on Star Wars are white men. When a field of work is that dominated by one particular gender, one particular race, it's kind of an issue. And the thing is, it's not one of those issues where you can say, oh, but the women just don't want to be in this field. Yeah, they do. A lot of women move to California, move to LA to become movie stars. A lot of women move to LA to become filmmakers, to learn how to become filmmakers, and then to get into the industry. They want to be in the film industry. There's a lot of women who want to be in the film industry and are shut out, just completely shut out, which is why it is a predominantly, like, it's a field that is dominated by men, quite frankly, and it's not a domination that is caused by some kind of an effect where it just so happens to be something that women don't want to do a lot of. Yeah, a lot of people will say, like the STEM fields, the science fields, there's not a lot of women in those fields, and they'll point to that and say that's a proof of sexism in that field, and that's not necessarily the case, as a lot of people in this particular group will point out. What's going on there is that there are a lot of women out there who would rather be homemakers or this or that. You know, they want to do other things with their lives. They want to go for other fields of employment. But in this case, it's not like there are a lot of women who are against the idea of being in the film industry. There are actually a lot of women who want to be in the film industry and are shut out of the film industry. So it's not even remotely the same thing. You can't say that, oh, they just don't want to work there. They do. They really, really do. And they are shut out. And what this executive was saying probably was that, hey, we need to change that. We need to bring more women into this industry because right now we are shutting far too many of them out. And that's true. If you actually look at the fucking statistics, if you actually look at what's actually fucking going on, it's the truth. And it has nothing to do with Star Wars. And it has nothing to do with SJW culture bullshit. It's just an actual true statement about what's happening in one particular industry, the film industry. Stop getting triggered by that. It's not the same thing as what's happening in STEM fields. It's something completely different. It's an example, a true real-life example of sexism in an industry. And that really, in this case, cannot be denied. Please try. It cannot be denied. I would love to see you try. And then he goes on to talk about what Rian Johnson said. He says, what about the director of The Last Jedi who says we need less white dudes in Star Wars? Well, that's a misrepresentation of what he actually said. He said we need less white dudes directing Star Wars films, which again, I feel like you could say is a fair assessment because there have been no directors of Star Wars films who were not white men. Every single director of a Star Wars film is a white man. Every one of them, even the ones who were thrown off the set and replaced with Ron Howard, who is also a white man, all of them have been white men. Every single last one of them. So what Rian Johnson is saying is, hey, maybe we should get some women or some people from different cultures who aren't white to direct a Star Wars film and see what they can do. Because he's noting, again, in the film industry as a whole, they shut a lot of people out. And he wants to see that change. I want to see that change because I love movies and I'm tired of seeing only one viewpoint projected. Or in particular, I'm tired of seeing only one type of person, only one race, only one gender get the chance to actually make a movie or to be in a movie or what have you. And I agree with him. I don't see how you could disagree with that. I mean, again, we haven't even had any directors in the Star Wars universe who were not white men. So how can you disagree with what he's saying in that case? And why would you misrepresent it as he's saying we need less white dudes in Star Wars? First of all, again, 96% of the people who worked on Star Wars are white men, so maybe it should be a little less than 96%. That's not an unfair assessment to make. Second of all, that's not even what he said. He was talking specifically about directors. So, You're just making shit up, man, to make it sound worse than it actually is, because you want it to be worse than it actually is, because it's all about the politics of it for you, isn't it? That's all it is. The last thing he said here that I'm going to mention is, he said, what about when Freddie Prinze Jr. got on Twitter and said, and I'm not even going to repeat what Freddie Prinze Jr. said because I don't give a shit. Who fucking cares about what Freddie Prinze Jr. said on Twitter? Nobody. Nobody cares. He has nothing to do with Star Wars. Why is it even an issue that this actor from the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, got on Twitter and said some things about a Star Wars movie and about the people who watch the Star Wars movies? Who fucking cares? Why is that an issue? Why do you care? And furthermore, why is that? Why does that constitute proof to you that Star Wars is going in the wrong direction? Because one actor from a bygone era said something. Really? He doesn't even have anything to do with the fucking franchise, and you're going to use him as an example? I mean, how does that work? So, I feel like I've gone over enough here, but like, this video is an example of the kind of thing that you will hear when you click on any of these videos of people talking about how they want to boycott Solo, a Star Wars film. They focus predominantly on Kathleen Kennedy. And this video wasn't even about Solo, a Star Wars film. But again, if you actually go to watch the videos where people are talking about Solo, they basically hit on the same points. They just keep talking about how they don't like the direction Kathleen Kennedy is taking, and they quote that interview with Kathleen Kennedy, and they say, see, this is proof. This is proof that she is refusing to cater to us, the male fans. And that's why I picked this particular video, because it's an excellent example of that. Not necessarily because it's an example of a video of somebody who wants to boycott Solo, although I'm pretty sure this guy in another video did mention that he's going to choose not to see Solo, a Star Wars film. But I could be wrong about that. Regardless, it's an example of the viewpoint that the people who actually don't want to see this movie have. Now, to finish off this video, I'm going to make a few points here about why it is stupid to boycott Solo, a Star Wars story. First of all, people keep saying that Kathleen Kennedy is like an SJW, social justice warrior, and she's ruining the franchise. This is a big point that they make when they're talking about refusing to go see Solo. They act like she's trying to feminize the Star Wars universe and that she is inserting an SJW agenda into the Star Wars universe with every decision that she makes, including who she hires as filmmakers and all of that stuff. Well, hate to break it to you, Kathleen Kennedy has yet to hire a female director. She has yet to hire a director that is not white. She has yet to hire anybody who is not a white man to direct a Star Wars film. The whole assertion that, oh, she's an SJW and this is all about identity politics is ridiculous, because it's based on the premise that she's not giving white men a chance to have any kind of representation in the Star Wars universe. Meanwhile, she only hires white men to direct the fucking films. That's the most important fucking job in terms of filmmaking, and she gives it only to white men. How can you look at that and still have the opinion that it's all identity politics, SJW bullshit? I don't know how anybody can see that and come up to that conclusion. The second point I want to make here is that George Lucas has been planning to do standalone Star Wars films since before he sold the franchise to Disney. That's right. This was all part of the plan. So if you're just saying, I don't like these Star Wars story movies, they're against what Star Wars was about, they're just a quick cash grab. Well, they were Lucas's idea. George Lucas came up with the idea for these movies before Disney even bought the fucking franchise. He was going to do this without them. I guarantee you wouldn't have called that a cash grab. You would not. You wouldn't have been like, this is SJW bullshit, either. Because it would have been George Lucas, the almighty venerated George Lucas. Let's forgive him for the prequel trilogy. So yeah, he has been planning these particular films, the Star Wars story films, since before Disney was even involved in any way, shape, or form. So to say that this is all Disney ruining the franchise, or it's all Kathleen Kennedy and her SJW bullshit ruining the franchise, is ridiculous. Next point I want to make is that Solo: A Star Wars Story was written by Lawrence Kasdan, who you may remember as the writer of Empire Strikes Back. He's pretty much like one of the best writers tied to anything Star Wars related. Period. He was one of the people who made Star Wars what it was. He was actually one of the people who made Star Wars what it was. And he wrote this film. He worked on the premise for this film with George Lucas. And he also worked on the premise for this film with Kathleen Kennedy. So I have no idea why anybody doesn't think this is going to be a good idea, or that it's not going to be a good film, because it was literally written by one of the granddaddies of everything Star Wars. So it's probably going to be pretty fucking well written, at the very least. You know what I mean? Even if you don't like the guy they chose to play Solo, this is probably going to be very well written, because it was written by Lawrence fucking Kasdan. So there's that. And the last point I want to make here is that George Lucas himself actually came on the set. This is something Ron Howard said during an interview on The Tonight Show. He came on the set of Solo: A Star Wars Story, and he was actually giving pointers to Ron Howard. And he said, you know, if I were doing this scene, I would do it this way. Which, if you know George Lucas, sounds exactly like him. So it's probably not a lie. He probably actually did go on set and say, you know, I think this is the way this shot should be done. I mean, there are actually... you can see him doing this in, like, the Indiana Jones outtakes and whatnot for the fourth Indiana Jones movie. So it's not like it's out of character for George Lucas to do this. He does this all the time. He comes on set and he inserts his own ideas of what he wants to see, and he's an idea guy, right? And well, that's typically what he has become when it comes to the Star Wars franchise. It isn't his anymore, but he still comes on set apparently, and he still came on set for Solo and gave Ron Howard an idea for the scene, and Ron Howard took the idea. He said, I will do that. Shot the scene the way that George Lucas said it should be shot. So George Lucas had an influence on at least one scene in Solo: Star Wars Story. So this whole thing about how it's not Star Wars enough because it's these new people like Kathleen Kennedy coming in and ruining Star Wars is ridiculous, because George Lucas was involved. Lawrence Kasdan was involved. All these people who have strong ties to the fucking franchise and know better than anybody else what Star Wars should be were involved with the making of this film. It's just stupid. And I know I said that was the last point I was going to make, but I have to make one more point here. Have you seen anything in the trailers so far that looks even remotely SJW? You got to think about who the character of Solo is. Han Solo? He is kind of a womanizer. He is kind of a douchey character. And he's a white male. Oh my god. White male. A white male is being represented in a Star Wars film. Predominantly. He is the center of fucking attention. So the one thing you complain about when it comes to Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy and SJW, you're SJW-ifying the fucking Star Wars movies. The one thing you complain about there, this is kind of a response to that. They're giving you what you want. They're giving you a Star Wars movie that focuses entirely on a white male character who is kind of a fucking womanizer. And what is your response? Well, they fucking burned the bridge when they made The Last Jedi, and now I'm not going to see this one even though it caters directly to me. What? How can you be that fucking petty? How can you be that fucking stupid to not recognize when, after everything you've said about how Star Wars is not appealing to white men anymore, just even to men, and how you think that quote from Kathleen Kennedy is proof that they don't want to cater to men anymore. After all that, they make a movie with a white male character as the focus, and your response is to say you're going to boycott the movie? What the fuck is wrong with you? Seriously, what in the fuck is wrong with you? I don't understand how that works. Please explain it to me. Please explain to me how they actually make a movie that caters to you for once, and your response is, they didn't make the last movie cater to me, so fuck them. And people who are in charge of Lucasfilm said they weren't going to cater to me, so even though the trailer shows they are going to cater to me, fuck them. It don't make no sense. These boycotts are fucking stupid because they are based on false, faulty, in some cases false, in other cases faulty information, in other cases just concepts that people think they're seeing in Star Wars, both in the movies and outside of the movies, in the production of the movies. They think they're seeing these things that look like PC culture, that look like social justice warriors trying to infiltrate the Star Wars universe. It looks like that to you, so you're triggered, and you're going to allow yourself to get so triggered and butthurt like a goddamn snowflake that you're going to refuse to see a movie that actually fucking caters to you. That's just sad, man. That's just sad and fucking stupid and pathetic. It's fucking pathetic. So, if any of these reasons sound like reasons that you had that you weren't gonna fucking see this movie, then you have my answer to that. I think that's stupid and petty. Pathetic. Like, why? Your arguments in this case make no fucking sense. They made a movie that catered specifically to fucking you. To you. And you're not going to watch it because Star Wars as a whole isn't catered to me anymore. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. It's just stupid. That's all I can say about it at this point. It's just fucking stupid. But when I say it's stupid, I mean that's my opinion, man. That's my opinion. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to minimize the group. I'm not going to make you out to be smaller than you are, because there's a pretty big group of people who are feeling the same way as those who want to boycott this movie. What I'm saying is that I can find no legitimate reason for you to boycott this film. And because I can find no legitimate reason for you to boycott this film, I find it ignorant to boycott this film. That is my opinion on the matter. So, take that for what you will. That is all I have to say on the matter. And that is all I'm going to say in this video. So, thanks for watching. Catch you later. Peace.